Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have, oh no, not the Fifth Amendment, posted by CH4Locks, and that's a cross post from the LOL subreddit, and that's the title of that post is Trump. He's speaking on Fox News. He says, Trump, the courts have all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they said, maybe you have to have trials. Trials? We're gonna have 5 million trials. It doesn't work. You wouldn't have a country left. And yeah, personally, I do kind of agree with Trump there. A lot of times the arm of the law moves very slowly. Like when look at Trump when they were trying to charge him, it took them so long. He ended up back in the White House. So yeah, I do think the courts do kind of move at a glacial pace, all things considering, and they do kind of slow down the government a lot of the times. But that can be kind of good. So a lot of the times, I would say the government shouldn't have unchecked power like Donald Trump wants it to, especially when it comes to deportations. But just because the government can the government has the power to do whatever it wants to, regardless of what the courts say. So, yeah, if the government wants to give you a due process legal trial, it should be able to, but, just because it's in the Constitution doesn't mean the government has to follow it. The government has routinely disregarded the Constitution time and time again, and yeah, I personally like due process and legal trials, even if, I personally don't think the state should have any control of the legal system whatsoever. But, just because the government can do that doesn't mean necessarily should or could. A lot of people, we need liberty, but a lot of people would exchange that for safety. And that's why I kind of see Donald Trump's point here. If all these murderers and rapists are on the street, the court system is going to take forever to get verdicts on them. So I can see the point of trying to deport as many of them as possible, disregarding the legal system. But with that being said, just because people are bad people doesn't mean they shouldn't be and not entitled to due process just like everyone else, even if they aren't citizens. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump defends the high price tag for his military parade, peanuts compared to the value, from NBCNews.com, posted by Donald Key, and that's a cross post from the No Shit Sherlock subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for Trump or in his military parade, but if he wants to spend taxpayer dollars on that, the government can justify spending taxpayer dollars on whatever they want to. Look at all this. Personally, I think it's interesting. Donald Trump is marketing himself as, I'm going to have this Department of Government Efficiency. We're going to throw away taxpayer dollars being wasted, but then he wastes taxpayer dollars and stuff like this and pouring money at Israel. So, it just goes to show you how, regardless of which branch of the Unity Party is in power, they'll just piss away taxpayer dollars no matter what. I'm sure Kamala Harris, if she got elected, she'd piss it away on something else, something stupid as well, too. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Supreme Court allows Trump to implement transgender military ban, from NBCNews.com, posted by Dr. 307. And yeah, personally, I think if the government should be able to restrict military service to whoever it feels like. I know a lot of people my age, including myself, can't serve in the military because they're on an SSRI or they have some other disability. But transgender people, I personally think that they probably shouldn't serve because I think gender dysphoria is should be a disability that should preclude you from serving. If autism and being on SSRI preclude you from serving, I would say gender dysphoria should as well. Maybe some people who transgender people who don't make it their entire identity and don't constantly yell about misgendering, maybe some of the less woke ones, maybe they could serve. But I definitely do think it's just kind of a distraction in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the military context. Like if I'm in battle, if we're in battle, and one of my military colleagues gets super uppity that I accidentally misgender them, that's not what you want in the middle of battle, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump Dress Up from Tom 13. That's a picture of a Tom the Dancing Bug comic by Ruben Boiling, and it says Donald Trump Dress Up Trolls. Hey MAGA fans, here's a fun activity. Dress up your favorite president hero. He can do and be anything he wants. Just print and cut out the figures. They have U.S. president. Does dress Donald up as an actual president, doing president stuff like making up tariffs every week, 11.6%. Banana Republic dictator, Donald as a two-bit tyrant, installing crony loyalists in the military and persecuting universities, Roma parade. Founding father, when it comes to things like perfect citizenship and due process, only Donald knows what the Constitution meant to say, and spoiler alert, it's not what it actually says. Gestapo officer, here's a fun throwback. He's got his own personal policies, police force, ICE, illegally disappearing those who disagree with him and those who are less desirable skin tones. Axe tongue papers, please. Pope, why not? Our saintly Donald deserves all these fancy clothes, golden jewels, and religious adoration. Who is more worthy of the papacy than someone who's already infallible? And then Tom 13 added, funny, depressing, infuriating all at the same time. And yeah, my thoughts are, this is just kind of another Orange Man bad post, I don't really care for all the circle jerking Donald Trump does about himself, like posting an AR picture of himself as the Pope, but the left keeps taking the bait every time, and their anti-Trump circle jerking is kind of just as annoying as Trump's pro-Trump circle jerking, and his base, I wish people could just shut the fuck up about the guy, but that doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon, I'm so tired of the pro-Trump and anti-Trump circle jerks, and it's been 10 years of this, next month marks 10 years since when he came down the gold escalator and said, I'm running for president, build the wall, and they're not sending their best, and yeah, eventually this has to end at some point, but I don't know if it doesn't seem like it's going to end for a couple more years at this point, unless some delusional Redditor, I guess, takes him out, and they're too busy circle jerking on Reddit and to actually leave their house and go do that. So yeah, it's probably just going to be a few more years of this at this point. Then we have 2 more judges blocked the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport migrants from CNN.com, posted by Dr. Who 07. And yeah, I personally, as I talked about in the first article, we went over the judges, they can justify whatever they want to, but the president, he's ultimately going to have, I think a lot of people are going to defer to his authority over the courts, and that's ultimately, it doesn't matter who makes laws, I would say, as I've said in the past, it matters who enforces them, and oftentimes, they're going to defer to what the president says over the courts. Is that the right thing to do? Well, ultimately people will justify if they justify regardless of the legal system in place. So, people, make your own decisions. That's my thoughts on that issue. Just because the president says something or the courts say something doesn't make it right. And, just because something is legal doesn't make it moral. What happened to Anne Frank and the rest of the Holocaust victims was 100% legal under the rules of Nazi Germany at the time, but that doesn't make it right. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have mod announcement, our next AMA from Long Jumping Gain 807, and that's cross-post from the Supreme Court subreddit. And they said, hi there, so I figured since it's May 1st, it's time for writing this, so I would start the month of May off of a big announcement. As you guys know, we started doing AMAs in the space, and they've gone very well. Our most recent with Ari Khan, and our first one with Patrick Giacomo and Dylan Moore. I started enjoying seeing the diverse questions as well as the answers that these people give. I'm eternally grateful for these people as they take their time out of their busy schedule to come and answer their questions for us. Well, I have another person who will be coming to our sub to an AMA, and this might be the most interesting one yet. On Monday, May 19th from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, or 3 to 5 p.m. Central Time, Josh Blackman from Volok Reason will be coming here to answer all your questions. This thread will be to field questions for Josh Blackman and also to field reactions to this monumental news. For those familiar with Mr. Blackman and his work, I'll link a few of his articles that have been shared here below. Josh Blackman, who was the most consequential Supreme Court decision over the past 5 years? No, it was not Dobbs or Bruin. Blackman, the U.S. Court will repudiate FDR and Humphrey's executor, and the Roberts Court will repudiate Trump and maintain Humphrey's executor. Blackman, Ramini, Meanie, Maimo, and after only 2 years, Bruin's gotta go. Blackman, Justice Barrett's concurrence in Vital v. Illustrates repudiation of Bruin's traditional test. The flip side is the CFB versus CFSA is if the director requests zero in operations. His website is also very helpful, and you can find it out here. I hope you guys have fun with this. Post your questions, comments, and concerns in the comments below. Thank you to Josh Blackman for doing this. And yeah, I think that's interesting. He seems like a relatively libertarian fellow. I personally don't really care for the Supreme Court or any courts. I think people should be governing themselves rather than any court, president, or Congress. But ultimately, the legal system in place is ultimately enforced by the state, so sometimes you have no choice but to obey that. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Memphis police officers found not guilty of all state charges in Tyree Nichols' beating death from NBCNews.com, posted by FlimsyAl5563, and they added, I cannot imagine what led to the jury to their decision not to convince. And yeah, just because, that just goes to show you how the police, a lot of times they can just kill a guy and get off scot-free because people will defer to their judgment, and even in civil cases, you can't even go after them all because of qualified immunity in a lot of states. But yeah, just because, as I said before, just because the court rules something doesn't necessarily make it correct. I personally think they should have been held accountable, but a lot of people don't think don't think so because they support the police because I think it's interesting how, a lot of conservative folks have "Don't Tread on Me" bumper stickers, but next to that have "Thin Blue Line" bumper stickers because, those are kind of contradictory positions. Just because, you don't tread on me means the police shouldn't be treading on you either, and just because the boot is more your coded than the other side coded doesn't mean you should be licking it, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Marjorie Taylor Greene is now selling Gulf of America hats for $42. MTG pushed House Republicans to vote on her bill and is now selling hats off of it, from posted by Donald Key, and that's cross-post from the Facepalm subreddit. And yeah, it's a tweet she made. Breaking Gulf of America hat just dropped, and it's already making waves. Red, white, and blue to make a statement. Remember, red, white, and blue to make a statement. Get yours where it sells out, and then she links to her store on whenred.com. And yeah, ultimately I think a lot of politics is just grift. But of course on Reddit, they only care when the outgroup does it. They don't care when AOC sells tax the rich sweatshirts on her store because she's a member of the in-group rather than the outgroup. But that's just as much grift, but Reddit would never care when their side grifts. It's only when the outgroup grifts that they care about. Then we have, if you try to kill members of Congress in Trump's name, your family gets $30 million, from Google.com, posted by CH4Locks, and that's cross-post from the military subreddit. Jan 6 Rider, Ashley Babbitt Estate, given $3 million for storming Capitol building. And yeah, it's linked to that they linked to the CBS News, the Google redirects to the CBS News link. Trump administration reached its settlement with family of Ashley Babbitt Rider killed on January 6, 2021. And yeah, ultimately, if they want to reach an agreement and give her money, that's, they can justify throwing money whatever they want to. But it's interesting how when, she was killed by the state and they gave her money, but they don't, and Reddit doesn't like it, but because she's a member of the outgroup. But I'm sure if they gave Tyree Nichols or one of the BLM riders from 2020 money, Reddit thinks that's good because they were tread on by the state. Ultimately, the state can just throw money at it wherever he wants to. Sometimes they'll be members of the in-group, sometimes they'll be members of the out-group. I personally don't think the state should just be throwing money around, especially to people who are behaving badly. But, ultimately people will justify whatever they justify. And Reddit, they'll say this was bad. But I'm sure if they stormed the Capitol after the 2024 election, and a progressive protester, Redditor type got killed, and they gave them $30 million, they think it was good. They think it was good because, people don't really have values these days, only teams. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And let's see if there's anything else. Looks like there isn't. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.